Jason.
Hey, we're back here this evening. We are here with Plain Permaculture. Jason, what's your name?
Renaissance Now on YouTube and D Live.
Thank you for that. And Trinity 4. So hi guys.
Hey.
Hey.
Hiya. Good evening. Hey. It's 2 nights in a row with you, Karen.
I know.
Making a bit of a habit of it.
Hang on, there's the screen stuck. Hang on, just let's, I don't know, that's it. Yeah, I just basically, it might be best not to have you, yeah, that's it. It's all right now anyway. It's going now. So yeah, we're back together. It's Permaculture Talk.
Yeah, so it's been a while. I think as a personal update, I've just been planting a bunch of fruit trees, and it rained a lot last night, which was really good. And you know, I'm getting more of the infrastructure done on my place, and I've heard a lot of people talking about the need or the want to get land, and that's kind of how I came across Jason. And he was talking with Flat Earth Fokker, and they were talking about, you know, just the situation we're in and ways to move forward and actions we can take. And he's been talking about getting land and setting up a little Flat Earth or awake community. And so that's been, he can talk more about that, but that's been a cool thing starting.
Yeah, me and Mac sort of got into that.
Can I just say,
because Mac has all this energy.
None of you have met before either, have you? Like, this is the first hangout you've had with Dave and Jason.
Well,
so,
I've talked with Dave before, but yeah.
And and then Dave and I have gone back and forth on just on YouTube comments over the years, I think, but we haven't. This is the first time sort of talking with the voices.
Yeah, cool. Anyway, carry on, Jason.
Oh, yeah, so Mac has a lot of energy, and we'll talk, and he gets very frustrated with, you know, just the state of the world. And, you know, he's been gotten ticketed and pulled out. He showed me this video yesterday of him getting like ripped out of his car and like getting handcuffed, and they put his arm behind his back. And it's just like for like making a left-hand turn where at like 12 o'clock at night where you're not supposed to make a left-hand turn. There's like more violence inflicted on him to make him comply to these fantasy rules than he actually committed. So yeah, anyway, so he's got a lot of energy. So we were talking about like, what can we do now? And I lived in an eco village back in 2007, 2008, maybe 2008, 2009. And that was in Oregon, and it was 88 acres. It was a Christian church camp that was called Lost Valley at the time. And it's still there to this day. And it was maybe like 6 friends from San Francisco that had bought it back in like 1985. And it had like 2 huge dorms on it. So I think each dorm could house like 50 people. It had like 7 different cabins on it. And then it had condos on there too that people could rent. So people that were maybe either outside of the community or temporary to the community would rent those out, and that would be sort of a profit center for the 88 acres of that community. It was a nonprofit. And so I just see the potential for us to sort of borrow from that intentional living style. And especially those of us that are so frustrated in our own lives, sort of dealing with this satanic inverted reality that we've all been submersed in and raised in. And that it's, I don't know how much, you know, I woke up in 2005 to 9/11. And so it's been 15 years, and, you know, you lose all your friends and you lose all your family, and you know, not all of it, but you just don't talk like you used to, and you don't relate like you used to. So I sort of missed that ability to just walk outside and have people that I don't have a bunch of resistance with about every topic in the world, because you either have to play along with the fantasy that like the Oscars matter and like who won the Super Bowl matters and like what TV show are you watching, or you can say like, you know, everybody's lying to us that has any power and wealth. Like, what can we do about it? And most people don't really want to address that. But those of us that do are getting online and talking about it as much as we can and pushing the ball forward. And so I just see there's going to be a point where people start getting land and getting together. I think it's already happening in New Zealand, that they've taken over an old, you know, hippie commune, in quotes. in New Zealand, and I wish I had the link. I'll have to share it in the. We created like a little Flat Earth Town Discord server. I don't know how we share that on here yet, but that's where we're going to sort of gather the ideas and gather the people that are invested in this. Right now, we have 25 people that joined the server, and yeah, just basically going to start floating ideas. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. I want to see it sort of organically grow into like people that are like super excited. And I've seen it happen to Mac already in the last 48 hours. He went from super sour and like angry at the world and wanting to storm the castle to now like his last two live streams have been about like, man, I'm getting excited about, you know, having a vision of how we could like sort of rebuild our society together.
Even within that one hangout you had, he had a turn at the end where you kind of got a little bit excited.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's that idea of, you know, we have to have a vision that we can, you know, get passionate about versus this, like, let's tear down the monster. Like it's like this shadow creature that we're fighting. And you could spend our whole lives sort of looking for its tentacles and trying to tear it down one by one, or we can, you know, sort of gather our resources and find a, you know, and it doesn't have to be one town. Like I think it's a model for whoever can start this thing first to share sort of what they've learned in the building of it process, so that there could be one in the States, one in the UK, one in France, one in Czech Republic, all, you know, and everybody can sort of help each other figure out like, what do we need in a society? How much dependency will we have to maintain on, you know, getting beans and rice and oils from, you know, the not milk system? And then how much can we fill in with our, you know, orchards and gardens and animal husbandry? And you know, this seems to be the history of humanity, is that we provided for ourselves with the land, and we've just been disconnected and hurtled into the scarcity of scared cities, or scared into the cities of scarcity. And so it's just,
yeah, I mean, this has been happening, you know, outside of the awareness crowd, sort of the awake crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, one could argue that that's what the hippies were starting to do, and they kind of turned it into this sex, drug, and rock and roll stuff, so they can kind of bring people back to the system and kind of just make them apathetic and not doing stuff. Whereas a lot of them were going out into
told us it's hippies. It could have been loads of other people.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of groups that were doing this, and it's a timeless thing. So, people really, when you sort of have enough of, well, you can come at it from two different ways. Either having that natural urge to get back to the natural system, or seeing all the negative and realizing there's got to be something better.
Yeah, because abundance in nature, it's the law. Like one seed begets like an infinite supply of seeds, and somehow out of that we've found ourselves in the most debt that any society's ever been in the history of man. Like,
I just wondered what Dave thought about it. Dave?
Well, I think that we have seen the hippies, and there are today quite a number of sort of semi off-grid or off-grid type communities that have emerged over the last few years. Most of them, to be fair, don't know that the Earth is not a spinning globe, but you know, there is, the model is there, and there are people. A friend of mine, well, a couple of friends of mine are out in Portugal doing that. Many of us know Martin Kenny. He's setting himself up a little school, and you know, building a little thing. He's just messaged me yesterday. He started, you know, doing some planting now, and of course, as plain permaculture will tell us, you know, it does take a while to establish your land. Another friend of mine, Daniel, he's got a place out in Portugal, and he's invited me to come and spend some time out there. But it does require, you know, a significant investment of time, effort, and energy from those people who are able to make the break. One of the advantages, I think, that our friends in America have is that there are vast tracts in North America. There are vast tract land that can be, you know, acquired fairly cheaply. In Europe, some of those vast tracts of land tend to be in countries where the first language is in English. There are all those sort of challenges of moving between countries and having to have a passport or put your get your dog vaccinated, or you get yourself, well, your dog vaccinated in order to take your pet over to law, for example. So you know, I'm all for it. I'm you know, I'm heading that way, and for me, it feels like a little bit like that movie trilogy with the Insurgent, Divergent, and there was one other one where they've created these sort of super cities, and people are all sort of in their job lots, in their job roles, and their lifestyles and so on. And then there's that sort of wall, and people who don't fit in are forced or choose to leave the city. And I think that may well be some kind of pre-programming, or some, you know, that they're showing us what we're wanting to do, and the direction that we're wanting to take things in. I think one of the, you know, I've spent a bit of time with a bunch of flat earthers, and I think that I'm glad, Jason, I think you were saying, as Mac was saying the same thing. I haven't listened to any of his latest podcasts. You know, just because someone knows the earth is flat doesn't immediately put them in the sort of you know, off-grid type category.
Right.
They're not necessarily all of the mindset to put in the labor and so on. And one of the hardest parts about all of this is that one seed will create an infinite amount of fruit or plant or seed into the future, but it does take 10 years or 15 years to nurture that seed to a tree that is yielding that kind of a return. So, you know,
But I
off-grid
think that would be
communities that
part
are
of
just
the.
setting up.
Oh, sorry. I was going to
Well,
say, I
no,
think.
I mean,
Oh,
I just
I'll
Go
let you
on,
go.
then.
up there, Jason.
Go on then, Dave. Finish your bit then, and then
Well,
Jason will talk.
I mean, you know, I think that these are some of the. I guess I'm just coming in from having had a slightly frustrating, challenging day, and feeling like I'm myself at like wit's end with, you know, where am I going? I, you know, don't expect people to know exactly what my story is or my current backstory is, but you know, I've been sort of divesting myself or removing myself from the system for some years. It's been some years since I had any kind of regular paycheck, and so you know, getting to a position where, for example, even if I was to go out and spend some time in Portugal with this fellow who has some land and stuff, I would still need to be generating an income from some other source for a period of time. You know, if you said, oh, look, here's a field of 30 apple trees, and they're all 50-year-old trees, then I'd know that if I nurtured those trees through the spring and the summer, I would get sufficient apples to generate income, that I could swap those apples, you know, pickle them and do things with them, so that I could generate an income through the winter. But until that time, until you've got a flock of sheep that are, you know, full of wool or whatever, you know, it does take breaking away, unfortunately, requires a bit of fiat currency in the pocket, and more so when land is like it is in England, kind of hard to come by. So yeah, I'm just feeling a little bit. I kind of get. I'm totally with this kind of, you know, screw the system. I'm glad to hear, you know, that Mac is, you know, putting his fantastic energy into things that are not about trying to beat the system down, because I think that that's exactly what the system wants. The system wants you to exhaust yourself on trying to tear it down. And I don't know that it's necessary. I don't believe that it's necessarily that's the way that it's meant to be. That you know, individuals can stand at the gates of Parliament and call it out for what it is, because people have been trying to do that for a long, long time. And I don't see. I think that they've themselves for that. I mean, in the case of the UK Parliament around Westminster, they've got these concrete guards to stop people from driving vehicles into the place. You know, they've got all their police, they've got all their CCTV cameras, which will always work unless it's a false flag attack. And you know, they're designing this sort of this fortress situation, I think, in the cities to protect themselves from people who want to try and tear it down. So you know, and I think, you know, there is a sort of biblical aspect to this idea of turning the other cheek and being able to find a divine way to make a life for ourselves, no longer so reliant on the system. So yes, I'm all for, you know, conversations and energy and ideas and initiatives. And if I could tag myself onto an initiative that was going to, you know, exchange my energy for, right, you're going to be able to put your energy in, and it's going to return to you enough to keep you in this situation, rather than you, well, you've still got to keep your day job. I think Mac sometimes works as a Uber driver or something, and you know, you've still got to go and do your driving, or you know, and as I'm talking to my wife about, you know, are we in that situation where I have to still go back, put on a suit and tie perhaps, or do something to keep paying this, you know, to keep buying food, or to put petrol in the tank, or whatever, you know. So it's a frustrating time for me personally, but it's really exciting to hear that more and more people are looking to set up these communities. However, of course, we know from the pre-love movement or the hippie movement, these things can be co-opted, and of course, the idea that just because we're 10 flat earthers means we're going to be pulling in the same direction and be able to build a community together is also a little fanciful. And when I heard about the sort of flat earth towns and stuff like that, I know maybe that's too specific a title, but it's like, are we not meant to be of this, in this world, but not of this world? And I wonder whether what we might entrap to is becoming like, well, we're exclusive from everybody else. And I've thought about this for a time, you know, because for years I've been thinking, shit, do I go and find myself in Peru or in somewhere else and go and just work in the sticks and, you know, grow some potatoes and some fruit and what, or am I meant to be in this world? So I'm kind of torn between continuing to be an activist in the world, to activate for change, versus creating a life for myself that is no longer so dependent on the state, on the system. So that's my kind of opening thrust.
Yeah, and Dave, I understand where you're coming from. I think I don't know if the timing was similar, but about, you know, when I first started seeing your videos a couple of years ago, and I saw you on this like Speaker's Corner, and I think it was on, I don't know, it was another corner, but I put a clip of yours in my like sort of flat earth testimony video, saying that, like, you know, you believe this is an awakening, like a Christ-like inheritance, that we're supposed to come into our own power and our own sort of divine path that's going to open up and unlock. And at that same time, I had a very, I won't get into it too much, but sort of a channeling, a spiritual sort of thing that had never happened to me before, that gave me the same exact message at the same time I saw you talking about it. And so it's been a hard path ever since, because it was, you know, like the natural abundance I think we're supposed to be inheriting here hasn't sort of manifested in that time. In fact, it's been the opposite. Like, I had a bunch of different income streams, a bunch of different businesses all working at that time, and then everything seems to dissolve and slip away and disappear. And I don't know if it's because, you know, money is evil and like we're being purified, and so you can't be playing with the devil's like dirty dollars, like, and still be divine, if that's what's happening. And we need to just like return to natural systems to, you know, receive our inheritance, or if it is just a message that we, like, I think I saw you say yesterday, we need to build it. Like, we got the message, and now it's like we have to figure out how to implement that system. And for me, it was like abundance is able to be done here. Like, it's taken me about 2 years now, but just yesterday I got the solar panels set up on our house, and so now this computer right now is running off the sun. instead of the utility grid for the first time, and since I had the idea 2 years ago. And so these things aren't going to happen overnight, but that's why I think part of the message that I want to say is that this doesn't have to happen overnight. This has to be it's about giving us a vision, and rather than staying in the stagnant, like waiting for, the Deus Ex Machina moment, where the God comes from the sky and just says, okay, all the bad guys have to go get locked up in, hell, and all the good people, now you inherit the earth. And like, if we're going to sit around and wait for that, I think it's going to get harder and harder and harder for us to sit and wait. But the people that are like ready for action, and like we're talking about here, this idea of getting land, and so I'm just trying to sort of see who's interested in the idea right now. This isn't going to happen tomorrow or the next month even, but it's going to be like us getting excited about a shared vision. And I like the idea of calling it Flat Earth Town, because it's like, it's just very straight to the point and direct, that like it's one place in the world where we can go where things make sense to us. And then it can be like, I don't know if it would end up being some kind of tourism thing where people are trying to like come and see us, and you have to charge $50 for a Glober to come in and like come see the facilities or whatever. I don't know how that pans out, but these are the sort of things I want to talk about and get, like you were saying, I wrote down a few of the notes while you were talking. So Mac and I were talking the other day, and he had the idea of like, okay, anybody that can get $5,000 of credit, like just get $5,000 of credit. If we get 1,000 people to pool $5,000 off their credit card, and we're all ready to just kill our credit scores, and then that's $5 million from 1,000 people getting a credit card, maxing it out, saying, screw the system, screw the banksters. We know these guys are criminals, and we want to break free. And the way we need to do it is by, pooling the fiat, enough fiat to be able to buy those resources, buy an orchard with a lake and like some like cement mixers and, be able to build a lumber yard. So we're not just going into this, I mean, we could do this any different kind of way, but I like the idea of doing it much bigger and pooling massive amounts of our numbers in to create the resources that we need to get off to a successful start, and to be able to have the tools at hand. Like at that village I lived in, we did have like a mechanic shop, and we had a big old kitchen, and so we had all the basics that we needed to live fairly cheaply and unplugged from maybe 25% of what our dependency was started to come from our own land, and then you try to grow that number over the years, and so I think it's about just getting people that are in this mindset together to see what we can make happen. Because if we can get this ball rolling and we give a vision to how to make this thing happen and what we learn along the way, then other pockets of it can start to happen. Like you said, like there's plenty of models of this already happening, and it's just that the people that have built those communities don't, they still think we're on a spinning wet ball hurtling through an infinite vacuum, that we came from monkeys and all that jazz. And playing permaculture, do you have I forgot to ask, do you have a PDC? Did you end up studying for permaculture?
Well, formally I just took Jeff Lawton's online course, so I am certified, but I never took a in-person physical one. But I actually did it. I did the whole thing basically on the last day I could turn it in, during my brother's wedding. So, I mean, I know it really well. I just took it kind of just to get the certification.
Okay, yeah. Because it would be great to just like be able to, like all the different little efficiencies and systems that you get from, getting a permaculture degree being implemented into a living situation, and then having other people that are sort of that same mindset, learning and sharing, making things more efficient. And like this old school idea of, the Tartarian, I think it's Subphotonic who's talking about this now, that like the whole plane was like a computer board, that like different buildings were like, had different functions like you would see on a logic board. And so the entire community being built from the ground up using sort of permaculture ideas to make the most of the land that we have. And basically sort of getting the best, like the most expert minds that are in our community, or else like, going to classes and starting to contribute our time to learning what we would bring to the community, being part of this like incubation period.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's a need that.
Oh, what was that,
I was
Dave?
gonna
Come on, mate.
I was gonna say I was gonna address Dave, and it seems like Dave, you and your family are kind of stuck in the middle, like you're in the transitioning from the unnatural system to the natural system, and it's kind of that unknown, and you kind of go through with withdrawals, and it depending on how old you are, you know, it's tougher the longer you've been in that system. Like I've seen from my parents, the transition's pretty hard, and sometimes they, you know, they have their bad days where they're just like, what am I doing? But the um there really is, like, if you were gonna, in the case of my family, we essentially traded in all of the equity or the value of our little postage stamp house in the city and used that money. And then there was you know, money from for instance, my mom's retirement. She was a nurse for like 35 years, so she has a pension and all that stuff. But if you were going to do this without money, I think one of the only ways is you really have to network. Like you really have to network. And it, depending on, there's also the aspect of what type of person you are and what type of energy you have, because there's some people that literally just manifest things, and so they're the doers. They go out and they just make it happen. And there's others where you put stuff out into the ether and it kind of comes back. Things that you need come back for you. So depending on what type of person you are, but either way, I would say networking is really the way to go. And even if you were to go and volunteer on an organic farm in an area where you wanted to end up, it wouldn't be a waste, because you might find that connection that way, and they might know of somebody who needs help on their land, and will essentially, you can build that trust and end up permanently staying there. Like I know somebody who, I took a cob workshop with somebody, and they lived on a piece of land that was like a land conservancy. Like essentially it's a trust set up for that piece of land, and they're just the caretakers. But the person, they just were friends with the person who set that all up and owned that before. And so they ended up just, you know, they're just there permanently, and they're not an owner, but they're essentially a caretaker of the land. So there's lots of different options.
Yeah,
But
that's the way I've been.
and if you were to,
That's actually how I've been trying to make it. That's how I've been trying to make it. You know, I was initially a year and a half ago trying to get onto a farm and do some cannabis growing, like hemp growing. And then through my pal Ian, I have I did a bit of woofing, and it's worth people looking into this. Working on Organic Farms is a website, and it's, you know, basically an exchange of labor for accommodation and food often. And that is a fantastic way of networking. We did a spell at the end of last year. People who watch my channel would have seen me up in Scotland with Andrew and Alexander. We spent a month up there. I mean, it wasn't the right environment, and it wasn't the right kind of farm for us. It wasn't going to give us the opportunity to you know, develop anything for ourselves into the longer term. But it was a good experience, and I would, you know, highly recommend that to someone who was kind of looking to break away. Because yeah, I mean, I'm I'm in that latter group. I think if I had an asset in the city, and it was something that I could sell up and put 100,000, 200,000 pounds down somewhere, then and you're willing to, you know, move somewhere remote, then you can invest some of that in a piece of land and keep some aside for you know, the cooler years, until the permaculture, until the land starts developing. Because yes, much of our land has been robbed of its natural productivity. It's all been cleared. There's, you know, I mean, in this country, it's hard even to get a hold of land. Farmers are paid not to farm their land. You know, this nonsense that we've got going on where you know, in the European Union, farmers are often funded to just keep their land clear, and there's so many restrictions, particularly here in England, on what you can use the land for. And you know, you can't just build a, you know, if you wanted to build yourself a small house or whatever, you can't do that unless you get the right kinds of permissions from the system and pay the right sort of taxes and fees and charges. So there are, for someone in my position, the more limited kind of options, and it is about the network. And I mean, you know, partly why I do some of the stuff I do online is about trying to establish a network. And the guy that I met in Portugal, I only met him because I was on the Global Eye tour last year, and he came down to see us and do some activism with us in the street when we were in Portugal. So, you know, I'm building on that, but I guess, yeah, when you're a little bit older, when you got, you know, children and you know, other dependents who are kind of not necessarily wanting to take the same path as you, then it does kind of just add to the complexity of the move. But you know, we are keen to achieve that. It's just going to be an interesting journey getting there, and it is a little kind of uncomfortable running week to week without any certainty about how you're going to fund the week after. You know, so I think, you know, I think the Mac idea of pulling 1,000 people together is nice, but the challenge is that when you've got 1,000 vested interests in any project, if you've got 5 vested interests in any project, then you know, it can get a little tricky trying to you know, pull all of those interests in the same direction. And if you need any additional funding, it's about going back to those people and so on. But you know, I really would love to see something like that happen. And if it had a flat Earth tag to it, then fantastic. You know, good luck to you guys out there.
I think, yeah, I think the 1,000 people that might create some issues, just having that many people together for a lot of things. I wouldn't discourage it, especially not discourage the talk about it, but I think smaller groups is probably more realistic or more uncontrollable as far as manipulation by the system and stuff. But yeah, I mean, we got to start talking somewhere. We got to, you know, move past just awareness and into action, into real living, because, you know, as it is, people
and being examples. Yeah.
Huh?
Sorry, just saying, setting an example and showing that it can be done. I mean, there was I don't know if you came across in your research that South African guy, Michael Tellinger. He set up a scheme called Ubuntu, which means sharing, and he was starting to set up this Ubuntu town in South Africa. He got the local mayor to sort of sign up to it and so on. And was it in America? But the problem, then he came out and said, yes, the Earth is flat, and within a few months had to walk away from that because it was costing him, I think, his scheme, his Ubuntu, it's Ubuntu. And this idea of communitarian kind of living is exactly what Andrea and I talk about, because really it takes a village to protect a village, to provide for the older people, to nurture and rear the youngest members of the community, and provide them with education and well-being and so on. So it does require a community effort. But my friend over in Portugal, Daniel, who set up a community. This is not flat Earth. He's a flat Earther now, but this is not a flat Earth community. Although he would love to have more flat Earthers come there, and we're talking about the possibility of running a sort of flat Earth camp out there this year sometime. He set it up with a pal, and then they had divergent kind of ideas, and it created a whole lot of challenges. The pal needed to be bought out, you know, and so you know, it's not, you know, in an ideal world, I'm totally, you know, not wanting to undermine this initiative, but in an ideal world, you would have people would be able to be given a piece of land, and they would be within that land. They would be a part of a community, and they would share their produce and share their effort, share their skills with those around them, and it would be that kind of thing. When it's a commune, and you know, typically there's one person who has a bigger share or you know, a controlling interest and so on. It can kind of start to smell a little bit like, you know, a cult, where people are like, well, you know, in order to, and actually, I mean, I don't know if my friend Daniel will listen to this, but you know, his place used to be like a sort of vegan focused kind of community, and if you came in and you were something outside of that, then you weren't necessarily as welcome as, you know, you would be if you were vegan. And I think this is the, you know, this is my note of caution, is that these things can become a little bit like, oh, if you're not in the club, then, you know, you're not welcome here. And you know, if we are all this higher Christ-like kind of, you know, spirit, then I think that if we fall into the trap of making, you know, all these rules that says you can't have this. Well, I don't know if you hear that, but an American fighter jet just flew overhead. But I'm staying at the moment at a actually a Christian establishment. It's an old like 17th, 18th century home, and it's been, you know, held in this Christian trust for a long time. We've got this free accommodation in exchange for some work at the moment, but it's right near an American Air Force base here in England, and they do fly overhead all the time. Anyway, that, you know, these are the sorts of things that kind of, you know, niggle me. Ideally, I would be, because, you know, even, you know, whenever it is that if I'm working for somebody else, you know, I'm going to spend 10 years, for example, working on somebody or working on someone else's land, and never actually. So what I was trying to say is that we are meant to be given land. Our birthright is to have land. Sorry, my son wants me to blow bubbles. We should, our entitlement coming here as God's creation, or this creation, is that we should be given land, and we should have that land to build on, to grow on, and to generate an income from. That should be our birthright. But I know we're obviously having to cut our cloth, and I think perhaps starting small, getting you know, ourselves a little bit of, you know, getting involved in a community is probably, for a guy like me, the only way, through the network, through working with others. And certainly, if I was in America, you know, I think I'd definitely be calling for a network of people to come to that. I haven't yet got that here, and of course, land in this country is harder. It's harder to come by, and the opportunity to be so productive with the land is maybe a little bit harder to come by. But
Dave,
these are some of my challenges.
Dave, have you looked at any of the eco villages that are the intentional communities in UK, like Findhorn, or I guess I'm just looking at them now online, like Braziers Park or New Creation Christian Community or Tinker's Bubble?
I haven't actually, to be honest. I haven't. I guess I've been holding off on that kind of thing. It is a strange thing when you're, coming out of it as a flat earther. I actually had a conversation with a guy today that ended with him saying, "Are you a flat earther?" And I ended up telling the guy this. He's the chef at this place, and I ended up telling him that I was, but I would prefer that he didn't. He didn't share that with the other staff at this point in time until a little close to when I leave, because it does. I've just had so much kind of grief from people, and I'm not even sure they would want me to stay if they found out exactly who I.
Oh, really?
Who I.
There's that attached to the ball.
Say again.
They're that attached to the ball that they would ask you to leave?
Well, I mean, it's a funny thing. I sort of said in the staff room yesterday over the tea break. I said, "Look, guys, I have to admit. I mean, they're all quite strong Christians in this place, and I said I have to admit, I think evolution is a deception, a lie, and it's certainly not biblical." I knew that people were averting their eyes. I mean, because as a child, I grew up telling preachers that the Bible was, a flat Earth book, and how could they be, how could they accept, how could they be happy with us going to school and learning about evolution? But most religious people, most Christians, think that evolution is just part of God's great plan. I mean, is it, is it me being a little bit sensitive? I've just had quite a difficult year or so with activism and stuff, and I'm just tired of people kind of giving me that judgment. But to answer your question, I haven't actually. I mean, I've heard about these communities, and perhaps that's our trajectory, is to end up trying to connect to one of these communities. And of course, I'm a partnership. There's two of us here, and I've been pushing for this, and my wife is perhaps not quite as far ahead as on this journey as I am in terms of some of the sacrifices that one has to make along this way, and as you say, if you're a little bit older, or maybe not in bad age, but there are certain things that we have to give up as we go along this route, and and one of them, I know this is going to sound odd, but one of them, I think the place out in Portugal doesn't have Wi-Fi, and for us that would seem like a bit of hill. I think playing permaculture, you've also got. You say you had sort of Wi-Fi. You don't have a Wi-Fi thing there, so.
I don't have a phone. There are all these things any of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, these are so for me anyway, or for us, part of the journey away from the system. This is the dichotomy really. Is that, are we meant to is the scarcity thing that we're trying to get away from pushing us into a situation where we have even less in terms of this world? Is it what I don't want to have is like a like Mormon, is it Mormon? No, not Mormon, the Amish. What I don't see the Amish model, although the community aspect of the Amish model and the labor on the land and so on is a fantastic model. Equally, the sort of leaving of all technology, or all of this sort of aspects of the system isn't necessarily for me the way that I'm meant to take this journey.
Let me just talk about why I don't have Wi-Fi or power lines or whatever. Because well, with the power lines, for one, it was really expensive to get it from the neighbors, and once you put it in, then you have to pay them, and the power poles themselves, you know, kind of hurt your land, and they have access to your land and kind of a right of way after you put them in, and uh, but the power itself, the way it's set up, it's very, very harmful. It's like like Wi-Fi in general. I see a lot of people emphasizing technology and the connection we get through technology, but once you, like, if you were to not use your phone for a week or a month or however long it took, and then you went back and you started to use it, you would realize, you would start to feel what it does to you. And for me, what a cell phone, just a cell phone does, an older cell phone, it feels like an hour of on and off chainsawing. Essentially, it's like temporary nerve damage. And people will talk about how they get numb and all these effects of headaches, all this stuff, their eyes hurt, whatever it is, but they're not paying attention. They're not conscious to what's around them, what they're doing. And so a lot of not using the technology is by choice. I could set up Wi-Fi and internet and all that stuff, but as it is, I can just go to the library in town and use it if I need to, or, you know, that way, you know, I can go back home and be out of all those signals. And one of the criteria for finding our land was to be in a place where there's not close by towers, cell phone towers and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that people probably aren't thinking about until you kind of get out of all of that energetic soup, and you start to feel the difference. There's such a difference being truly natural and having the natural signals. And what the Wi-Fi and all that wireless stuff does is it puts your body in a defensive mode. Like when I get into the cities or into a place where there's Wi-Fi, you know, you kind of get into this defensive mode. And when I'm leaving, that's when I start to feel the effects of it. That's when your body starts to heal, when you start to hurt and all that stuff. So there's an obvious difference in way of living that I think a lot of that Amish stuff and things like that, they've just kind of realized, you know, the positives or the negatives of either.
Yeah. No, I totally, when I, you know, as you're talking, I know that you're absolutely right. You know, I would prefer to be away from ground towers and overhead cabling, all of these sorts of things. But you know, I confess that I think, you know, it's as a partnership between us, we are still somewhat wedded to some of that stuff, which you know, feels like a big step away, and maybe, you know, maybe you can get into one of these communities for a little period of time to have a kind of, you know, because it's a weaning from the things that we're used to, you know. And if you're used to, say, having a washing machine to do all of your clothing, and then you end up having to do it by hand, it's like that's a big step to ask the wife or the person who does the laundry to take, you know. And in my case, I live, and I know these things are harmful for me, but my entire, you know, my own, you know, my whole, at the moment, my whole kind of presence, as it were, on YouTube, and my efforts to be a voice in the wilderness or in the dark or in the world is all run from my phone. You know, and so, you know, this comes back to that kind of like, you know, getting that right balance between, you know, your well-being, your health and stuff like that, and obviously being a contributor in the world. I
Yeah, I would.
a year or two ago, go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, I would just suggest that, or throw out that maybe the disconnection you're looking at is actually a connection to something else. In other words, you're disconnecting from the unnatural system and you're connecting to the natural system, and it's not such a drop off a cliff like you're imagining.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're probably right. And you know, after this call or in the next day or three, I'm certainly going to look to connecting with one or more of these off-grid communities that are in the UK. You know, for us, yeah, I mean, you know, we have two children who are in the system totally. They're at university and so on, and you know, moving away a long way away from these two children feels challenging for us. So, you know, any long-term arrangement out in Portugal at the moment is a long way off. But perhaps, you know, it's a staged breakaway for us. But for others, it might be, yeah, you can very quickly move from this modernity into a far simpler and more natural way of life. You know, and hopefully this conversation offers people that kind of juxtaposition of thought about, you know, what does it mean for me if I'm going to make these changes, and how do I get involved in something? And of course, if there are these projects like the one that Jason and Mac you know, are talking about in this Discord, which we'll be able to drop when Karen plays the premiere of this in a few days' time, you'll be able to drop links as the premiere goes out for the Discord server that you've set up, so that people can join that conversation, particularly those that are out in America and those in other parts of the world who are looking to do a similar thing. Because yeah, you know, I want to see people thrive, you know, and make their own way and divest as much as they can from this poisonous, toxic, satanic, dark, evil, messed up world that we're so unfortunately so deeply connected to.
Yeah, and part of my motivation is more about creating a model, like, because with permaculture, the main idea is to just sort of have the snake eat its own tail, to keep your inputs minimized, if not zero. And so, you know, I just think we're scattered about, every day we're spending money, every single day. Like, if you just added up everybody that like is either in flat earth or just wants to break free of this, you know, satanic society, just the amount of money each of us is spending, like just on coffees and soap and you know, paying the electric bill, like every single day, if we just saw that number of how much we generate as a community, it's got to be in the millions, like just in one day. So I just think there's an opportunity for us to figure out, okay, we're all spending collectively, as the 10 million flat earthers on this plane, we're all spending like $3 million a day. Now, could we not somehow figure out how to funnel like $50,000 of that $3 million a day into a shared vision of a place that maybe it's not practical for us to move right now, but we want to participate in this vision of this thing being built and see the idea of, like, because maybe I can't even do it right now, but maybe someone else can, like, go in and start the orchard. If, say, tomorrow we had raise $10,000. And we're like, okay, like to try and move it more as an idea than trying to move it as like me right now, what can I do or not do? But like we have created an echo chamber here. That's, I think, the most valuable part of what the truth community has actually manifested, you know? And so in this echo chamber is a lot of ears and a lot of people that are stuck in the system, and we are giving our energy away every single day. And if we could get on board with a shared idea of like, okay, is there one place in the world that we can create, that we can contribute to? I mean, that's sort of the Vatican model, right? Like they've got the Catholic Church, everybody around the world is like, you know, tithing up to this Catholic Church. And so that they can go like see the Vatican and it's all its glory and all the gold statues and just have this fantasy vision of being, you know, closer to God because the Pope is and
Allegedly.
and yeah, and so like you know, I think it's about building a vision out of this thing, and I, you know, and I think it's that point that we're getting to. A lot of us are getting frustrated where we want to see some change in the like 3D. Like we've had enough of trying to change the minds and channels to be broadcasting the message. But as we're broadcasting it, like I think there's an opportunity being created for us to sort of create a laser-like focus on creating something the 3D together as a community, and say it's like, you know, like $1 a month times 10 million people that are like, yes, I want to give $1 a month to this vision, and then have it slowly build this community, you know, from whoever the ground team is, and then build it from there out, so that it is at least a hope and a vision that we can carry, that something somewhere in this world makes sense and it's growing from our input, from our energy, rather than the only thing growing being this like beast system. Like I just think at the end of the day, it doesn't care that we're mad at it. Like, because every day I got a $500 electric bill last month and like $300 the month before, and it's like, that's insane, and we're trapped in that. Like, wow. And that's not going away. And yet I, you know, like I would rather give that $500 to Dave to be like, okay, if me and 1,000 other people can give that to Dave to start a community that we can then know at least there's one platform somewhere in the world that is, you know, going to build the model, so that then you have like the on the ground information. It's like, okay, we need a soap maker, we need a candlestick maker, we need the cow to milk, or like, you know, like what are all the practical needs of this community as it grows? And I, you know, I don't need to be fully unplugged from things like laundry. You know, I would like to have a laundry machine on site for me, and like a dishwasher. Like I've grown accustomed to those things, and so I'm not looking to create a world where I have to walk away from, you know, and go back to like, you know, soap in the river on the washing board. I'm trying to make this easy. Like permaculture is about making life easier by just recapturing the lost energy that we've been trained into just using lossy systems. Like just turn on the faucet and let the water drain back into the sewer, and just pay $1 a minute for having that thing run. Instead of like you know, having that water go into our garden and then have it pour out of the garden into a koi pond, and then have the koi pond like filter, you know, being that, you know, just that the garbage of the koi pond being turned into the fertilizer for the garden bed. This is someone I'm like, I do video work for this military TV show actually, and they like, one of the guys is it was like sort of a Shark Tank sort of TV show thing that I'm filming, and but it's for veterans. And his idea is this thing called Revolution Agriculture, and it's to have these like 10 by 10 buildings built in the back of people's houses, but you don't pay anything for it. Like you actually you're just hosting the building. So they build this little 10 by 10 intensive grow room. It can grow 10 times the amount of food in the same amount of space, and it recycles all the water because it has a koi pond built into the bottom floor of this like 10 by 10 building. And then they just tend to the garden for you, and you get 20% of the profit off of it. And that's their business model. But I'm most interested in what he's figured out, because he used to work for what was it called? Like a soilless grower. And then he also, so he basically combined soilless growing with soil, and to be able to create this intent.
Hydro.
Oh, what's that? Oh yeah,
Hydroponics.
yeah. So he's like sort of splicing hydroponics with soil, like minimal soil, and then using the koi pond as the fertilizer and to be able to recycle the water, and then you get the koi fish as food.
Oh, like little aquaponics system, sort of.
Yeah, little aquaponic systems, and you can grow like any climate. So you can grow, like he can use that because it has solar attached to the top. You can make any climate inside. So you can grow bananas if you want to, or you can grow blueberries, or you can custom make that. So like a vision of that, like he has like I tried to get as much information from him as I could when I was working with him, but he's pretty tight-lipped because that's the thing he's selling to these investors. But once we get that model working, say we have that model, like that's an intensive way to grow like as much food as one family would probably need, if you're okay with like eating everything that you grow. Say you're a vegetarian and you're okay just every day with salads and beets and carrots and all these sorts of things, potatoes. And yeah, so I think it's about finding the models that do work and like getting the community out there as sort of this incubator, and then being able to grow it from there as like, okay, we have this system that works. It's a 10 by 10 build. It's completely self-sufficient. It just requires like an input of like 100 gallons of water, and then you put like 2 gallons in a day after that, and it produces all the food you need all year round after the initial investment of getting it built. And so I think once we have models like that to share with people and we show it working in practical ways, because for me, this isn't so much like, oh, can we make this happen? Like, this is what I'm doing. And so I want to share what I'm doing with other people as I'm learning it. Like, it's taken me a year and a half of like patching together how to do this solar and figuring out like what different gauges of wire need to be paired to where do I need to put breakers? Like, what can I touch? What can't I touch? Like, I need an inverter, a battery charger, like all these things I have to learn over the years. Like, I could now set somebody up in a day and a half. So it's that sort of efficiency I'm talking about, not just systems, but in being next to people that have expertise, to be able to make our lives maximum efficient and like luxury, basically. Like, I'm not trying to live like, I just watched a 30-day challenge where these 2 guys go off into the wilderness of the Rockies and they live off of like fishing every day and like trying to shoot gophers with their 22. And yeah, they lost like 22 pounds in 30 days trying to do that. Like, I'm not trying to like live that. I'm trying to take the best of what I have and make it just more efficient and live around other people that have a shared vision and like expertise. Like, I want us to be the best of the best, like sort of like a Superman or like, what is it? The Avengers sort of a thing. Like this is a destiny. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's really your preference. Like, if you wanted to just survive like that, you could. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
You could set up your system for that, but you can make it as luxurious as you wanted to, really.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about like, like having that. Like, the reason I found myself at that eco village back in 2008 is because I was living in New York City, running out of money, and like just seeing, it was also like Alex Jones is like, the FEMA camps are coming, like, and I was like, oh man, I gotta get out of the cities before I get put in the FEMA camps. But I mean, I was seeing brigades of police like practicing military style, like in Prospect Park as I was like riding my bike, and I was like, and then he's like, the police, they're getting ready, they're gonna round y'all up in New York City, and I was like, I was seeing it in real time, so I was like, I gotta get out of here, and I didn't have any money, and so I'm like searching for options online, and I found this eco village in Oregon that was called Lost Valley, and they were hiring for $50 a month someone to run their servers, and I was super interested in Linux at the time. And man, if only I'd gotten into Bitcoin at that same time, this would already be happening and funded. But anyway, yeah. So I ended up finding them because they like would give me room and board for $50 a month. So there are these opportunities that do exist where you can. And that was pretty easy work. It was what I wanted to do at that time. I was really interested in Linux and running servers randomly. Coming from video production, I just got into it. So it worked for me for that year. And yeah, I saw like the limitations of a very small community. So I like the idea of building a town. Like, I've been in a small community. Like, I started a food co-op there. I started a fermentation guild. We made like 50 different batches of beer, and by using the model of sharing and everybody kicking in money together, just $50, we were able to like get all of the tools that we needed to build, you know, a little fermentation guild. So, you know, that was something individually we couldn't afford, these $300 like buckets and mash whatever. It's been a while since I've brewed, so I don't remember everything. But we had, by taking this broke ass village of like 40 people and having everybody that was interested in brewing in that village, in that subset of that 30 people, there was maybe 10 people that wanted to brew, and we all kicked in $50, and then we were able to buy the whole kit that we needed for like these batch, like six gallon kegs of beer that we were able to brew. And then when I opened the food co-op, we were selling, well, I can't say this part because this is the part that ended up, one of my neighbors tried to end up taking me to court at the end because of, they thought I was using my EBT. I was on EBT at the time. They thought I was using EBT to sell stuff through the food co-op, but I wasn't. But they just found some receipts with other receipts, and they started to try to build a court case against me. And like, so I know how quickly this, like these little dream communities of like, let's get away from the man. And that's the mentality of the eco-village inhabitant, is like, that's how we were all sort of tumbleweeds of society that sort of landed in this village. And it wasn't owned by anybody. It's not, I don't think it's owned by anybody to this day. It's like a nonprofit that just exists under the, you know, the work that's done by the people that end up there at the time. And so the people that end up there, like the CEO of the Eco Village at the time was the intern 2 years earlier. And I was an intern when I got there. And by the time I was gone, they asked me if I wanted to be the CEO. And now I would say yes, but I back then I was like, no, I'm going to LA. I'm gonna go restart my film career. And so I got out of there. But I mean, that's how close we are to this kind of an opportunity. It's not so much about trying to worry about all the logistics for ourselves as it is like, use this echo chamber to percolate this idea. And somebody's like, you know, half dead on their idea of like all this land they bought, and they're just like out of like doing it. They didn't realize how much work it was, and they're like, man, I could use some help. And then they hear this message and they're like, wow, let me call Dave because I got all this land and I hear he needs somewhere to be, and like we could work out some deal. And like, I don't know, I'm just trying to use my go ahead, Dave.
That's exactly what it's in my mind. Like, you know, I have been hoping that you know, I would encounter a farmer, because you know, I'd try to do some work on a hemp, or try to get involved in a hemp project. And you know, it's an old farmer, and you know, he's got a bit of land, and you know, he's not really using it. His family are, you know, the youngsters have all gone off to the city, and no one's interested in farming anymore. Well, not no one, but there's not that many people that are interested in the farming, and it's hard to kind of make a living from just doing a bit of one man and his dog farming. So, you know, I was hoping that my network would eventually bring me into contact with somebody who would say, look, you know, I've got a few acres here that you can have access to for 10 years, you know, and corn rent. You know, you can do what you like with it. Basically, you're committed to it, and go forth. And I have friends here who would say, yeah, I definitely get involved with you in a project like that. You know, assuming you could accommodate them, and you know, and then you you build it up from something small like that. Because yeah, I mean, once you start to buy things, you've got to obviously go through the legal system to buy it. You as you suggested, you know, when there's 10 of you, say, and one wants to go in a different direction, and then you maybe got legal wranglings to attend to. Then yeah, real fiat currency needs to start pouring out of your pocket, and you know, the beets that you've grown are not gonna pay for your legal costs and so on. But so, you know, to have to get involved in something at that level would be really exciting. However, you know, to see a village set up, and you know, that would be great too. In fact, the friend who's got a place out in Portugal, he says the local village has got almost no one living in it,
Wow.
because everybody's gone to the city. And the local mayor has said, if you could get 13 children here, we could restart the school.
Oh, wow.
Kind of thing. So there are yeah, there are those kind of things where, and I'm sure in America there must possibly be, those sort of towns that are kind of, tumbleweed towns that could do with an injection of life, of energy, of infusion of people who are really looking to return to the land. And then this is an important part of it, is that, even if you don't want to give up the dishwasher, it is, for me anyway, I think part of my love of the land and my willingness to kind of be physical is very much necessary, because a lot of us guys have become softened by the computer's keyboard and by the sofa and the NFL and all of those sort of things. We're not used to working hard on the hands and that kind of thing. So it's we're all in a kind of transitional phase if we're going to move back in onto the land. But to have a small village that you could make something happen like that, I think that would be fantastic. It's super exciting, and I wouldn't want to pour any cold water on anyone's idea that they could pull something like that together. And it definitely, Jason, you got lots of energy. It sounds great. I mean, permaculture, I know, has got a lot of energy for the natural way of doing things. Mac is a very energetic guy. So I really would. I mean, I'll certainly keep an eye on what you guys are doing and try and give it a shout and encourage people to get involved in a project like that.
Can I just say something?
But yeah,
Can I just say something? I have to be somewhere in a short period of time. We've been going for about nearly an hour and 10 minutes already, guys. I just wondered whether we finish in a minute, but each one say a few words about what they've thought about this discussion. Would that be all right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Jason, you go first then.
Well.
Oh, okay. First, I want to thank you for hosting us tonight. I really appreciate that. And Dave, I'm so excited to finally have connected with you. I've been wanting to talk to you for years now. I don't know if you remember me emailing you about 2 years ago with the video that I used, that clip of yours. And we talked more recently back and forth. I told you about my mom and our journey together when we were young and how it reflected what I was seeing with you and your son, and how I thought it was a beautiful journey you guys were on. So I'm glad that we finally got to connect. And same with Plain Permaculture. Thanks for reaching out to me and getting this all connected and getting this ball in the air.
Yeah.
And I hope to see everybody that is interested in this idea over on the Discord. We've got about 25 members from basically Mac and I talking 2 nights ago. And we have 4 channels on there. We have a home building channel, which is where we're going to post all of this sort of alternative building materials like cob and rammed earth, and even this couple that's living like on a floating island that they built like one house at a time on these like old fish fertilizer barrels. And so just sort of, giving just to feed our inspiration. Another one called Land Locations, which has basically just different locations and ways to find land cheap in America. You can go to these tax maps and find where people are lapsed on their taxes, and then you can sort of collect, say, 10 people that are all on owe back taxes, and see if you could buy the land from them, large acreage. That way, I've got one video on there that sort of talks about one couple that did that, and then when they bought the land, they were able to harvest, like thin out some of the wood, and so they were able to buy the land for $50,000, and then they sold $32,000 worth of the lumber off the land. So the land only ended up costing them $20,000 for some like 800 acres or 100 acres, I think it was.
Jason, it's good to hear that you've got quite a few ideas there going around your head.
Thank you. I do.
Yeah,
and then the last
it doesn't mean we can't go back and talk about this again, because obviously it'll be talking and talking for now, won't it?
Yeah.
Maybe it's doing for you, but some of us will still be talking and some of us will be doing. But I just wondered, Dave, what's your thoughts then as we're ending this hangout?
Well, I think it's fantastic, and lovely to chat with you in person, Jason. I love your enthusiasm and energy, and always good to talk to plain permaculture. It's odd not to say your name, but you know, I'm all for it, and you know, I know I've come across pretty sort of pessimistic. I think that's, you know, tonight just, you know, where I'm at and how this journey has been sort of exhausting and at times extremely like lonely, you know, and you know, the sort of flat earth community is a disparate a bunch of people. We are all on our own paths and so on. And the world we know is totally screwed up. This world that we live in, and so it is. We are meant to get back to nature. We have had our nature robbed from us. So I'm, you know, all things said and done, I'm really applauding any and all efforts that take us back to nature. There are of course hurdles. Then the systems put a lot of hurdles in. Our pre-programming has put a lot of hurdles in the way that we could do this. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be pushing forward. There are good initiatives going on, and we can build on those. We have technology that we can use to, you know, bring people together, bring good ideas together, use some of the fantastic initiatives like this one of these 10 by 10s that you were talking about, Jason. So you know, I'm wanting to do this more. I want to have these conversations more, be part of the conversations that others are having, to take us all, to inspire people to take back control, you know, and you know, eventually offer something other than just simply go and work in the city, go and get a keyboard and surf that for the rest of your days. So, back to nature, my friends.
Thanks for that, Dave. Thank you. Plain permaculture.
All right. Well, it was nice to talk to you all, and I hope everybody considers where they are in life and where they would like to be, and the option to connect to the natural system really is the only way I can see people thriving, really thriving, and getting that purpose and satisfaction from life that most people, I think, are seeking. And coming from the other side, I'd like to encourage everybody to just continue and move forward, because when you get to the other side, it's anything but bleak and lonely, and there's a lot more support and natural synchronicities and nurturing than you think. And forming communities will have, you know, we'll have to work out issues, and there'll be a learning curve. And for anybody wanting to transition and you're not ready to do it, I encourage you to really educate yourself, look into permaculture. I have intro videos on my channel, and yeah, it was nice to talk to you all.
Will you and Jason put your, well, I haven't put your channels in, well, I can put your channels in the link. Yeah, send me your link to your channels, and I will put them in the description of this post.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll reply all with my info in the Discord link.
Yeah, it's been a, sorry, permaculture, plain permaculture. Have you finished?
Pretty much, yeah. Where do you want us to send you an email, or?
Yeah, just put your
okay.
Yeah, just put your channel links in an email to me, and I will add them to this hangout. It's been a very, very interesting talk. I mean, maybe it's not for everybody, but for those it is. What a great talk.
Yeah.
And it's very nice to hear your enthusiasm, even if Dave is feeling a little bit. But Dave, everything has been working out okay, hasn't it? You've managed to get to the next one, the next bit. You have managed it, so I'm very proud of you. Anyway, thanks very
Thank
much
you.
for listening. I've got a croak in my throat now. Thanks very much for listening. To the panel, and to the chat room. Thanks very much.
Yeah, love and thanks to you all.
Yeah, much love to everybody. Thank you.
All right then.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Gotcha, brother.
Goodbye from us.
Bye, guys.
Later.